International urea ammonium sulfate falling, China affected, in recent 2 weeks. International urea and ammonium sulfate prices have mainly fallen, while China's urea prices are weak. The ex-factory price of ammonium sulfate has fallen for 2 weeks in a row, and the export of ammonium sulfate accounts for 60–70%, or even more of its output. The ex-factory price of ammonium sulfate in China is closely related to the export situation. From January to April, China's exports of ammonium sulfate reached 3.17 million tons, up 2.9% year-on-year. From January to April, China's urea exports were only 450,000 tons, down 66.3% year-on-year. In the final analysis, ammonium sulfate does not need legal inspection. Under the Russia-Ukraine war, various countries attached great importance to the import of fertilizer, but under legal inspection, China's urea export time and quantity are limited. But since early April, international urea and ammonium sulfate prices fell for maybe due to the end of February. Since the war between Russia and Ukraine, international buyers have the same took part of chemical fertilizer in advance into the market. At present, these buyers' procurement, slowing down the international fertilizer prices. China's export price of the urea ammonium sulfate also affected accordingly. The offshore indicative price of China's ammonium sulfate crystal is around $290, not only slightly higher than the domestic ex-factory price, down $45, mount respectively from the year-to-date peak of $335, mount at the end of March. On the one hand, under legal inspection, the ex-factory price of ammonium sulfate in China is more closely related to the international price of ammonium sulfate urea. According to the current export price of ammonium sulfate in China, the exchange rate is 6.7, and the price of Chinese ammonium sulfate manufacturers to Yantai and other ports is still close to 1,900 yuan ton. However, assuming that this week's low price order in Southeast Asia is only $258 ton, then the price of Chinese manufacturers to the port is only 1,700 yuan ton and below. So the current ex-factory price of Shandong, Shaanxi and Hebei has dropped to 15,31,700 yuan ton, among which the ex-factory price of 1,531,630 yuan ton can be explained. After all, it takes a short period of time for the ammonium sulfate exporters to send the goods to the port for shipment, considering the low price in Southeast Asia. It took the ammonium sulfate traders nearly 2 weeks to lower their prices. It can be said that the international ammonium sulfate urea drop, Chinese ammonium sulfate affected. There is speculation that in the short term ammonium sulfate mainstream factory price may be as low as 1,450 yuan ton. On the other hand, China urea ammonium sulfate prices complement each other. The price of urea in China is especially high this year, which is several hundred or even 1,000 yuan ton more expensive than the same period last year. Chinese ammonium sulfate traders use ammonium sulfate to replace urea for production of compound fertilizer enterprises or direct fertilization. Although the single nitrogen content is seen, the current Hebei urea 36%, factory output is about 30,160 yuan ton. Hebei ammonium sulfate 20.5%, 1,630 yuan ton. And the following is still higher than urea, ammonium sulfate. But Chinese urea social low inventory Hebei urea factory, since the start of the 2,600 yuan ton rose to 3,200 yuan ton. All the way, the buyer may consider to the inside of the ammonium sulfate sulfur is a little advantage, and low concentration compound fertilizer sales is better. Some compound fertilizer enterprises Distributors routinely use ammonium sulfate factory basic heroin at 1,500 yuan ton, then the right amount of continued procurement, to sum up. The proportion of ammonium sulfate exports is too large, and the trend of international ammonium sulfate urea price is particularly critical. Countries that have difficulty in obtaining urea may continue to use part of ammonium sulfate instead. We will observe whether the export price of ammonium sulfate will continue to decline, and whether the price of ammonium sulfate in China will drop to 1450 yuan ton or even lower.